Welcome to today's show, and boy, what a powerful one this is going to be. I can hardly believe that we got so much to cover. I want to cover the latest breaking news from Barry Loudermilk, the congressman who's exposing the January 6th fraud, the disgrace that Donald Trump is saying is big news. 26 sources the FBI had in D.C., 17 that entered the Capitol, probably dressed like MAGA. And we've got an expose today. It's also, we're going to be talking about the continuing resolution. We're going to be kicking the can down the road for debt for America. Remember that prophecy from that one guy that he prophesied two things? It really bothers me. He said that Trump was going to get to be an assassination attempt. He saw blood in his face, saw something with his left ear or his ear. And then he saw in the first quarter, after a massive victory with patriots showing up, Trump with his hands in his head in the Oval Office. Can't believe it. Like COVID chapter 2, another global pandemic, only it's an economic crisis. Folks, we're $35 trillion in debt. We're dancing on a bubble right now. It's the only thing that can undo this golden era of what God could do in America is the sin of debt and what it's producing in America. That's why I want you to get Gold for the Trump Era, a guide that is available right now. Special forward is with Donald Trump Jr. talking about the silver and gold and how it's going to operate during this next period of 4 years. Go to lancewallnau.com/gold. Get your 12-page guide with a straightforward roadmap for protecting your savings in this new chapter of history. And we're going to talk about the threats with BRICS nations wanting to break up from the dollar and Trump saying, I'll tariff you 100% if you do. There's an economic war, a spiritual war. Go to lancewallnau.com/gold and get your 12-page updated guide for how to navigate during the Trump era with gold and silver. And let's get into today's show.
So this is a story about Humberside police who contacted a man called Harry Miller, I think, who had tweeted or at least retweeted and liked an offensive poem. It was a limerick, I think. The police officer phoned up and said, we are investigating you for this limerick. And he said, well, have I committed a criminal offence? And the police said, no, this is a non-crime hate incident that we have to investigate. Now, the problem with this wouldn't be if it was just one rogue police officer who was overreaching. You know, the problem is that Humberside police have been contacted by The Spectator, by Index on Censorship, and they've said, yes, this is our policy. So we are going to investigate non-crime if the incident is considered hateful. And even if you go onto the government's website about hate speech and hate crime, there's a section on non-crime hate incidents. You had South Yorkshire police who tweeted a number of months ago saying we were urging the public to report non-crime hate incidents. This is really troubling to me. This is straight out of Orwell. You hate to use the comparison, but it is. This police officer said to this man, we had to investigate this because we need to check you are thinking properly. We need to check your thinking. This is really dangerous stuff. And we can have debates about hate speech and the validity of that. I mean, I think on balance, because, you know, I know what happens in history when you surrender powers to the government to police what people say, it doesn't end well. And the price you pay for that is some nasty, people are going to say some nasty things. But this is a step even further than that. This is non-crime. The police have no business investigating non-crime, and they shouldn't be doubling down. Humberside police doubling down, saying, yeah, this is what we're doing, we're proud of it. No, they should be saying, we shouldn't do this, or someone should be stopping this, because this is going in a very, very dodgy direction.
And what was it that Churchill warned? Let me read to you something I was doing for some of you that are on my second day of the broadcast. This socialist state that is emerging in the UK is going to be dangerous because it would have to nip public opinion in the bud. It would stop criticism as it reared its head, and it would gather all the power to the supreme party in charge and the party leaders, rising like stately pinnacles above their vast bureaucracies of civil servants, no longer servants and no longer civil, Churchill said. And where would the ordinary, simple folk, the common people, as our brethren in America call them, where would they be once this mighty organism got them in its grip? Churchill saw, my friends, where America was heading with the woke virus, till it broke because of the fasting, prayers, intercessions, and desperate yearning of people that said, no, not here. My God, not here. And God heard those prayers, and he sent a vessel of providence as a blunt force object, as a Samson with a club, to deal with the Philistine threat. I want to read to you, and you can go, by the way, to my @Lance Wallnau Twitter account on X to get all these assets. We post them there for you on our broadcast. You can follow along. CBN has an interesting article. The Orwellian Britain sleepwalking? Are they walking into a totalitarian future? When a British lawyer and free speech advocate wanted to test the UK's censorship laws, she posted on social media that perhaps her cat, she said, is a Methodist because it likes Dreamies, which are cat treats. So she posted that her cat is a Methodist who likes dreamy cat treats. And then she said to a friend, I want you to report me for hate speech against the Methodists just to see what happens. Well, Sarah Fillmore tweeted a few more nonsensical posts, and the local police issued a case number. And they came at her for her comments about pets and Methodists. And she now has a police record. Fillmore says it was recorded as a barrister posting hate, or as a public person posting hate speech. When British police stopped Army veteran Adam Smith Connor as he prayed for a son lost to an abortion while standing within abortion clinic buffer zones, the officer's first question to him, what is the nature of your prayer, sir? Connor answered, what is the nature? I'm praying for my son. And for that, Smith Connor was convicted of a thought crime. You were thinking the wrong thought when you prayed. Are you guys following me? Dr. Kelvin Wright, also a British Army veteran, saw his military career effectively ruined after being put through an Army disciplinary process for sharing a social media post in favor of women's rights that offended a transgender British officer. Although found innocent, Wright had to leave the Army. He told us the frightening moral is this: don't dare say what you think. Don't voice your opinions. British police have now investigated 250,000 so-called non-crimes that are listed as hate incidents. Some citizens have actually gone to prison. When it comes to freedom, Britain has reached a tipping point. A nation that prides itself on being a champion of liberty is sleepwalking its way into a totalitarian future. The inevitable enterprise of socialism is it consolidates all power into the government, and then the government has only those that submit and those that fight the system, and those that fight it must be punished. I liken it, says a top free speech voice named Toby Young. I liken it to falling through a burning building, he said. You know, every time you think things can't get any worse and you finally reach rock bottom, the floor burns out from under you and you collapse to another floor below. And you're falling again. Some, like the London Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, have been investigated for social media posts a year or more old. Toby Young calls it offense archaeology. They go back into the archives of things you said earlier that right now are politically incorrect. Do you hear what I'm saying, folks? Offense archaeology. I'm seeing that in the church a lot. Going back 10, 20, 30 years, finding the offense and then trying you for it now. Miller, a former police officer, started the group after facing charges of what police labeled transphobic hate speech. Miller told CBN the police have to be very careful about their opinions and what they express, or they can find themselves at the wrong end themselves of a non-hate crime incident. They might be, even as police, written up for a disciplinary proceeding. They could potentially be thrown out of the police force. They have to enforce the laws. Connor Tomlinson, a British news commentator, says this, my final thought. We don't have free speech in this country anymore, Tomlinson said. Instead, if you're a Christian, if you question the open borders, if you question mass immigration in Great Britain, if you say some, let's say, ill-advised thing on a social media app, but you're not a member of a state-approved left-wing NGO, you could get sent to prison. Adam Smith Connor says his legal ordeal has been personal, tough. He fought for freedom in Afghanistan and lost friends there. I've got a profound sense of sadness for our nation, he said. The fact that we plummeted to such a depth so quickly is shocking to me. Woo! Think Canada's much different? Think you can't be arrested in Canada for saying the wrong thing? Who's the guy that we've had here? My friend has been on here several times. The pastor. Been arrested like 4 times and imprisoned up there. All right, so do we have any more assets there on the on what's going on in Britain? So what does it all mean, Brother Lance? Well, it means that you're living in a day where Canada, Great Britain, Europe, you're watching economic instability because of debt and bad management. We no longer have a Democrat and Republican party. We basically have one party and a populist movement that's fighting against it. And the proof of that is, as I'm segueing into, well, let's go. You guys got that, what Trump says about the drone situation? Man, we got so much to cover today. Trump's latest comments on the drone situation. Then I want to go into J6, the latest hot issue coming out there. President Trump basically says the government is not telling us all the facts. He says it's time that the government came clean. Go to video 12. Play that for me.
Can you comment on the drones that are flying around New Jersey ports? It seems like the American people have a big distance.
The government knows what is happening. Look, our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. I can't imagine it's the enemy, because if it was the enemy, they'd blast it out. Even if they were late, they'd blast it. Something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people, and they should, because the people are really, they happen to be over Bedminster. Want to know the truth.
Whoa. Why is the president-elect not being properly briefed? Or maybe he's been briefed, and he's saying, I'm not in power yet. I can't speak for the Biden administration until January 20th, when I get to make the decisions. But here's what he's saying. The government knows what it is. Now, here's an interesting development. A New Jersey pilot lost power after approaching the mystery drone. So a drone pilot in New Jersey was remember I wrote in my post, someone ought to track them. Track them. Find out where they are. You guys are citizens, like citizen journalists. Well, he tried to approach a mystery drone as it entered into a restricted airspace, and the FAA cut off his drone ability. They could actually shut down his drone so that it couldn't fly, but it allowed the other drones to fly. So if the FAA, if the government is allowing the drones to operate, but knocking out citizen drones that are doing surveillance, then the only answer I've got is to believe that, and then they're saying, the FBI, is the Department of Homeland Security, is saying, these are not just drones, these are manned aircraft. That means there's somebody in it, I believe, in those little things flying around. What are they looking for? Well, the theory is, from one expert who is only giving conjecture, they're looking for dirty nuclear bombs. We'll be right back with that story. We're entering a period of time that has increased hostility against people of faith. It's a time when Christians are going to be tested on a moral, physical, psychological, and even a financial basis. I'm here to remind you that God is the one who has blessed you thus far, and he will take care of you in the future. You have a divine responsibility, however, to see trouble and prepare yourself. For example, with record inflation eating away at the value of the US dollar, the savings in your retirement account is in danger of slipping away. I recommend diversifying your 401k or IRA out of paper assets and into physical gold. And the best way to do that is with a gold IRA from Birch Gold Group. Now that includes no penalties, there's no taxes when you transfer current retirement funds into Birch Gold. To see how it works, I want you to go to lancewallnau.com/Birch and get your free info kit, and you'll be glad that you did. Welcome back to the Lance Wallnau Show. You can watch us every day with these prescient, prophetic, pointed commentaries. lancewallnau.com/podcast. We're already at Lance Wallnau Twitter right now. What's the best explanation for the mystery drones? Bring up asset number 11. I posted this. One subject matter expert says a nuclear warhead has been missing from Ukraine. Not sure if this is current or extending back to the 1980s when Reagan was, trying to remove the stockpile. I'm going to attempt to post the expert, and I have the expert there. You can hear his whole 5-minute explanation. But I would imagine that the president-elect should be briefed on this because clearly he is in the dark himself to some degree. It's reported there have been significant radiation spikes detected in the New York, New Jersey metro areas amid a spate of mysterious drone sightings. The only explanation is that these are U.S. government-directed drones that are sniffing, which means scanning for radioactive materials in the New Jersey area, possibly due to actionable intelligence of a dirty bomb or something similar smuggled into the area. How far would the deep state go to initiate a hot war with Russia? I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about terrorists that got into the Biden administration who are planning a Hamas-style attack on the United States in order to disrupt maybe the swearing in of Trump. Maybe there's going to be these explosive jackets with people in a crowd that are going to blow up there, because if you've got them in this country, then they're here in order to engage us in military action. And I think that Trump is actually on to something here when he says the government ought to come clean. If there is untracked nuclear warheads that are now possible dirty bombs, if we have agents that are in New Jersey that are from the border, that are military assets, that are there to disrupt us, I want to know about it. I want to hear it. But matter of fact, let's go play this video clip of Sarah Adams, who's a CIA authority, blowing the whistle on how Al-Qaeda coordinated the Hamas attack. And it was disrupted by U.S. aggression, or as far back as the Bush administration, throwing off their schedule. But then Afghanistan provided a place for them to remobilize. Just listen to what she has to say. It's kind of shocking.
We knew the plotting had happened in Afghanistan, but we thought, okay, Israel is just going to keep calling it the Hamas attacks until they wipe out Hamas, right? That makes sense. You can't fight 3 or 4 different fronts, right, or different terrorist groups at the same time. Well, we're getting closer to coming up on the year mark of it, and Israel still wasn't telling anyone, obviously they knew IRGC was involved because they took out a bunch of them, but they weren't telling anybody about Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and they weren't striking Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. But we knew Israel is in a series of attacks, right? And those series of attacks include the U.S. homeland. So we're like, if we don't put out the truth that Al-Qaeda did October 7th, then how do we expect the law enforcement and first responders in the U.S. to be prepared if no one told them October 7th was the same people who are going to attack in the U.S., right? Because if you can look at those tactics, prepare, do different training, it puts you in a more resilient position if an attack happens in your community. So that was the catalyst that made us put out October 7th. So basically what happened is this was a joint kind of Al-Qaeda, IRGC thing. And I said, this is a whole bigger thing. And they did all this over Telegram for the most part. So they had an original planning meeting in Kandahar again. And then they had kind of like their second meeting up in Kabul. And then most of the rest of the plotting occurred via Telegram. And then, which is crazy, right? You'd think our governments could collect that in advance. We learned a lot of things during this process. First off, in the first plotting meeting, it was Saif al-Adil. He runs the military commission of the Taliban. He's the one that chose the date. Do you know what's significant about October 7th?
No.
So he first chose October 7th, 2022. I told you it got pushed a year because of Zawahiri, which is also its own point, right? We struck an Al-Qaeda member and it forced them to push the attack another year. What if we kept striking them in Afghanistan during that time, right? It could have pushed the attacks longer. And this is why I say we need to strike the command and control of the homeland attack, right? But anyway, set aside, October 7th was the day George Bush announced Operation Enduring Freedom, and we basically started carpet bombing Kandahar. But he understands the October 7th attacks actually have a connection to Afghanistan to begin with, and the date was chosen to do with Afghanistan. So everybody who's like, why do we care about Israel? Why is that our problem? It's like, that's just the first in a series. It's coming for us. That's like the test run.
Did you?
Wow, that's the test run. So I posted, bring up asset number 13, a worthwhile point. Sebastian Gorka is all over this. I promise you. We should get him on the, I don't know if he can talk anymore. He's now working for Trump. How many terrorists are among them on the Sean Ryan show? We have Sarah Adams, a former CIA targeting officer, author of the book Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. She says there's thousands of terrorists trained and ready for an October 7th style attack in America. Churches need to be armed with security and should be training in emergency. So I posted that episode, the entire episode for you, the episode with Sean Ryan, so you can get a hold of it. But my point here is I think we have one more interview. We only have 5 minutes, but I got to play the second part because of the exploding vests. This is what bothers me. These people are suicide-oriented, and they're here on this mission. That's why I don't think there's going to be any mass protest the left is going to be able to organize. Once America gets hit like this, I think there's going to be a furious resolve to find out who got into America and what are they doing here. Go ahead and play the next segment.
We have not had a man walk up to a building with a suicide vest on the United States. Americans don't understand this. Al-Qaeda knows this, right? So this is new and innovative, especially now. You don't have to walk upside of the building. You can walk in the building because of the advancement of the vest. The other thing is, in the United States, we haven't had Fideian attackers. So the concept is the terrorist fights to the death. So he's not exactly a suicide bomber, but he will fight till either all of us are dead or all of his people are dead. We think it's going to be a swarming attack, right? Multiple different attacks at one time across multiple cities. We think there will be suicide bombers just because some of the attackers went through suicide bomber training and they have these vests. And then we think there's these Fideian attackers who will carry on until they're killed.
You just rephrase that. So these guys are trained and they are going to fight until they're killed.
Yes, and that matters, right? So I was watching this video and it was a suicide bombing in Kabul years ago. The bomber blew up and then everyone starts moving in. The first responders move in, right? And then another guy walks in and blows up. We know this is a tactic. But if Americans don't understand this as a tactic and don't understand these attackers are going to fight to the death, think about that. Battle's going on. The attacker surrenders. He might have the suicide vest. You know, we let our guard down. That man came to die, right? He's going to fight till he dies or you die. So we can't let our guards down, and they know our weakness. So we have to be very careful that we don't have more people die in these second and third order effects of not knowing their intent.
So doesn't that warm the cockles of your heart as you go into the holiday season? You know, when I'm with Mike Flynn, it's kind of funny. General Flynn, he's so wired for threat assessment. Every conversation is about the threats, but that's the way he's wired. And I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be one of those people. But, you know, if you're going to be a watchman on the wall, if you're going to be someone who takes prayer seriously, and I believe many of you that listen to these programs, you really do take this stuff seriously. You do the work of reformation out there. You're also willing to pray and do the spiritual work too. You need to know we're in a moment of profound revolution right now. But I think if anything like that ever happens, Trump will have no problem with his deportation agenda. I think that all this stuff is going to work out. I'm telling you, it's all going to work out. Take a look at asset number 10. Wow, Trump says this is big news. What a disgrace. Let the J6 hostages out now. What's he talking about? Oh, the FBI lied to you. Did you know that? They had 26 sources in D.C. on January 6th. 17 entered the Capitol grounds. They were no doubt dressed as MAGA people wandering around with permission. What was their role in helping to facilitate the events that took place on that day? You better believe that's going to be a hot topic. Chairman Loudermilk, Barry Loudermilk of Georgia, released his January 6th report. Now, he's the one Republican, a believer, by the way, conservative in Georgia, who's been doing the research on the January 6th lies. He was tasked with the work of doing the honest investigation. He says, number one, Liz Cheney colluded with Cassidy Hutchinson. That's the chick that went up there and said that as a criminal witness, saying that Trump grabbed hold of the Secret Service vehicle, that he fought with the driver, that he dismantled him, and he tried to steer the vehicle into leading the attack against the Capitol. She falsely claimed that Trump drafted a handwritten note on January 6th. She basically, and this is Liz Cheney, colluded with a lying witness in order to create lying evidence against President Trump to lock up and justify the locking up of January 6 people. This is why you're reading all these tweets about she might get a pardon from Biden. Why? Because of her role. January 6th Select Committee was improperly constituted. It lacked the authority, but it sent Navarro and Bannon to prison. They deleted volumes of records and tapes that showed data and evidence as contrary to what they knew to be a fact. They intentionally delayed the D.C. National Guard's response. They published a flawed report. That's the Department of Defense Inspector General. All of these cats need to be brought up there on the Hill and explain this. The Department of Defense and Department of Defense Inspector General knowingly and inaccurately placed blame on the D.C. National Guard for the delayed response on January 6th. They obstructed Loudermilk's committee trying to get the facts. So was there anything in his initial findings report that you know of that's different than the most recent January 6th report?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things. So the initial findings report that was put out earlier this year in March, the Select Committee was designed to promote a political narrative. We know that. Cheney was vice chair, a position reserved for a Democrat. So that in and of itself tells you that there's inside baseball going on that doesn't actually stand up to the scrutiny of the orders and the regulations that are already in place. The Select Committee deleted records and hid evidence, something that Nancy Pelosi herself said we shouldn't be doing, yet we know how she is. She's an 80-year-old hag. The Select Committee promoted star witness Hutchinson's testimony, which, as you just mentioned previously, we know definitively is inaccurate and not true. The story about Trump lunging at the steering wheel in the SUV after speech at the Ellipse was directly refuted by the driver of the SUV. So how are you going to promote one story against another story without actually giving them adequate time or jurisprudence, due diligence? There we go.
I want you to play video number 9 from Johnny Maga. Stephen A. Smith on the news that FBI had 26 informants. Now, this is a liberal podcaster, broadcaster, who is now another one that is getting his eyes open and coming to some conclusions. Go ahead and play that video before we close out.
The news comes amidst a bombshell report from the Justice Department that revealed the FBI had at least 26 confidential informants on the ground when the Capitol was stormed on January 6, 2021. The report says most of the informants engaged in illegal activity during the chaos. The Justice Department says only 3 of its 26 informants present had been instructed to observe potential domestic terrorist suspects on the day of the riot. The rest of the 23 appear to have gone to the Capitol on their own accord. Upon hearing news of the report, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance posted the following on X, quote, "For those keeping score at home, this was labeled a dangerous conspiracy theory months ago," end quote. Didn't hear anything about that for the election. Didn't hear anything about that when the quote-unquote insurrection was broached by Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. The belief that Donald Trump was a danger to democracy and using this as a profound, illuminating bullet point to make that case. And now here we are yet again finding even more evidence to Donald Trump's claims when he articulated that process is rigged. My big issue is that I'm really, really sick and tired of every time I turn around finding something else that the Democrats have lied about or downplayed or misrepresented along the way. I mean, I see Republicans like Megyn Kelly or Officer Tatum or Candace Owens or, the Sean Hannitys of the world. You know what I'm getting tired of? To the Democratic Party. You know what I'm getting really off about? I'm getting really ticked off at every time they open their mouth about something pertaining to y'all, they seem right to make the case that the right had a monopoly on insidious, evil tendencies, corrupt tendencies, duplicitous, hypocritical, untruthful tendencies. And every time they made those accusations, we turn around and find out that at least some of them are guilty of the same shit. I don't know about y'all, but I'm sick of all of it. I'm sick of all of it. They've actually made Donald Trump look like he was right instead of them.
Well, it's kind of hard to beat that narrative right there. If you are looking for information that has been telling the truth from January 6th on, you want to go to Darren Beattie at revolver.news. And I suggest you subscribe and support him. That's the kind of sophisticated, well-researched, intelligent, documented, proof-producing that keeps the pressure on the subject. And Darren Beattie was the first one, along with Dan Bongino and Tucker Carlson, that exposed the extensive investigation they have into the two pipe bombs on January 5th and January 6th that is going to be released by Loudermilk, covering that, because they got the video footage showing the pipe bombs, and they're showing them with very casual police around it, talking to each other, people with strollers and kids walking back and forth in front of that. Why did they not tape that area off with that pipe bomb? Why did they not warn people? Well, because the theory is it was planted. And they could trace everybody that went into that Capitol and come home and bring grandma out in Colorado up to really take her to trial in Washington because she went into the Capitol for 10 minutes. They could trace her phone. But they don't have any data on the person they have on video who planted the bomb, got on their phone, talked, and then left. Why don't they have any data on that? Right there outside of Kamala Harris's office? Well, maybe it's because that was part of Plan B in the case that the insurrection scenario wasn't sufficient with Plan A. We'll find out, but that's what I want to get into. So this is lancewallnau.com/podcast signing off. Encourage all of you to stay in touch every day. Go over to our Twitter feed at Lance Wallnau, and you can keep track with the 4 or 5 posts that are the top posts of the day that you won't hear in the news anyplace else. We'll be talking to you again on our next broadcast. God bless.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.